up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG on the YouTube.com down there. We think Magic's fun, and today I've got a budget deck for you. Actually, it's the lowest budget of any deck that I've done so far this season. Do you want to play a really synergistic and fun deck that can just win out of nowhere in crazy ways for only 20 bucks on TCG Player? Well, let me show you Mono Blue Energy. I've been talking about this deck for a while. If you follow the channel, you know I've brought this deck up way more than just one time. It's because I'm like sort of in love with it. Like, this is one of my favorite budget decks that I've made in a really long time. The basic idea is to play a bunch of small creatures at the beginning of the game that give you energy, you know, things like Thriving Turtle and Aether Theorist and stuff like that. And then in the late game we'll play Aethersquall Ancient, return everything to our opponent's hand, so it's like a pseudo board wipe, that's great, and return all of our small creatures to our hand, which you can then recast and get a bunch of energy, enough to pretty much every turn return everything to their hand and our hand with Aethersquall Ancient if that's what we want to do. But we've got other ways to spend our energy in this deck, and a lot of ways to make energy. Literally 32 cards, over half the deck, makes energy for us. So let me take you through this. I'll start with these small creatures that make energy here. We're going to play 4 copies of Thriving Turtle, 4 copies of Minister of Inquiries, and 4 copies of Aether Theorist. Now, Thriving Turtle actually blocks a surprising amount of things in the format. It blocks Inventor's Apprentice, Sylvan Advocate, Grim Flayer, tokens, a bunch of other stuff. In the early game, 3 toughness is no joke, and like only 1 mana for 2 energy is good. Sometimes you will attack with this, like once or twice, get it to, you know, 4 or 5 toughness, and then it can block way more stuff. Like, it does have trouble against like Voltaic Brawler, Lathnu Hellion, and stuff like that, but other than those creatures in the early game, it's really solid. Oh, and Toolcraft Exemplar, it has trouble blocking it too. But once you get it to 4 toughness, it doesn't really care about Exemplar either. So Thriving Turtle is surprisingly good, honestly, and I have gotten it to 4 power before, so that's also not bad. But it's not the best creature ever. It just serves as just 1 mana, 2 energy a lot of the time. Same thing with Minister of Inquiries. It's a little worse than the Turtle, but it does have a power, so it's got that going for it. It's also kind of good against control decks, because when it's against control, I've gotten into these like big, long, drawn-out games, and sometimes the ability to mill them is very nice. So Minister, not incredible, and serves very limited purposes, but again, just 1 mana for 2 energy that we can bounce back to our hand is what we're interested in here. Now, Aether Theorist is really good. It blocks just as well as Thriving Turtle does in the early game, but 2 mana, 3 energy is a huge hike in energy. And on a 1/3, that's not bad at all, and we can scry. It's like a really good Sigiled Starfish, so Aether Theorist, absolute, definite 4 of. We're going to play another creature that gives us energy when it comes into play, and that's Electrostatic Pummeler, which we're just going to play a 2 of. We don't want to see it all day long, but there are interesting synergies, you know. We're playing Era of Innovation. We need artifacts to do that, and Artificers, which Aether Theorist is one of. But we need artifacts, too, to play Era of Innovation effectively, and Electrostatic Pummeler is that, so that's cool. But the best thing about Pummeler in this deck is that there's a kill shot combo with Engulf the Shore. Basically, in the late game, you can double his power a bunch of times, and then play Engulf the Shore, and hey, look at that, his toughness is way more than the amount of islands that I have. So everything except Pummeler gets bounced, and you can swing in for the win. The magic number here, by the way, is 15 energy. You can get 15 energy with an Electrostatic Pummeler out and an Engulf the Shore in your hand. You're not necessarily guaranteed the win, because they might always have removal, but if they don't, that's pretty much a KO. And the big daddy, 2 copies of Aethersquall Ancient in the deck. This is one of the whole reasons that we're building the deck in the first place. You know, we get to 8 energy, and we can bounce not only our small guys back to our hand and then replay them for a bunch of energy, but we're bouncing all of our opponent's creatures too. And if we can just bounce like 2, 3 creatures, then we'll almost be guaranteed to have all the energy that we need every turn to bounce things over and over and over. And this isn't incredibly effective against decks that run a lot of creatures with like ETB abilities. That's not great, but against a lot of the decks in the format, this is a fantastic way to finish off the game with a big 6/6 flyer and nothing else on the board. And once we get enough creatures on the board, he's our main way of cycling energy and getting more energy than we're putting in. Sort of a perpetual motion machine, you know? As long as we have the mana, we can replay creatures over and over and get like 10 energy. Well, it only takes 8 energy to activate. So if we can just keep doing this, and eventually we'll have a huge stockpile of energy built up. And it's actually pretty safe to do it, because we're returning their creatures to their hand too, and we're not going to get attacked that often. And if they do play one guy with haste or something on their next turn, not that big of a deal. We can totally block with our 6/6 flyer. So Aethersquall Ancient, usually your main win condition. Now we're going to play some artifacts in this deck, mostly so that we have that synergy with Era of Innovation, but there's other reasons to play artifacts, and good artifacts to play for this deck. Let me show them to you. We're going to play 2 copies of Glassblower Glassblower's Puzzleknot, 3 copies of Hedron Archive, and 3 copies of Dynavolt Tower, which is awesome, but I'll get to that in a second. 2 copies of Glassblower's Puzzleknot. It's a fair turn 2 play. We need to fill out our curve on turn 2. The total of Scry 4 is also good. You know, we're looking to dig for some important cards in the deck. We do a lot of scrying between this and Aether Theorist. But we need artifacts for Era of Innovation, and this, you know, again, fills out the curve. I just don't see any reason not to do it, because scrying is important, getting the energy from it is important, good early game play, like Glassblower's Puzzleknot in this slot. Hedron Archive not only draws cards for us, but is an artifact for Era, and can help us get to Aethersquall Ancient much quicker. It's actually not a very important looking card, but it's a key card because it fills out a few different synergies, and most importantly is ramp towards the Ancient. That can be, don't underestimate that. On turn 5 you can play Ancient, and that's really good. And Dynavolt Tower is actually another win condition. You know, it kills creatures, it shoots planeswalkers. It's our only defense against planeswalkers, like, nearly at all, so it's very important for that reason alone. But it can kill them, especially when you have more than one copy out and you're doing like 6 damage a turn. Dynavolt Tower is really fantastic. And, like, if you play turn 1 Thriving Turtle, turn 2 Aether Theorist, and then turn 3 Dynavolt Tower, you can go ahead and tap it and zap something. That's actually a very important play. So Dynavolt Tower has been surprisingly good, and there's actually a 4th copy on the board because it is just that good. It wasn't even in the deck when I started building it, but Tower just as even another win condition and something that provides a fair amount of defense for us, and we need to fill out our curve on turn 3. We're not playing a whole lot of 3 drops here. So Dynavolt Tower slots in for all the right reasons. Let me take you through the spells in the deck. A total of 11. We're playing 8 instants and 3 enchantments. The 8 instants are important because we've got Dynavolt Tower and we want to cast a bunch of instants and sorceries. So let's go ahead and look at all of these real quick. We're playing 3 copies of Era of Innovation, 4 copies of Engulf the Shore, and 4 copies of Glimmer of Genius. Era of Innovation can either refill our hand in the mid-game, or it can just like stockpile energy for us when we play artifacts, which can be pretty important too. So I gotta play some amount of Era. That's so much card draw. And, you know, just playing artifacts, 2 energy a pop is not bad at all if we pay the 1 for it. So Era of Innovation's flexible. It does a couple of awesome things. So let's play that. Engulf the Shore, key card in the deck. Not only you know, Aethersquall Ancient, but this is another way of putting our creatures back into our hand, and is a great board wipe on turn 4 some of the time, you know. Really good defensive card against hardcore aggro. We're going to want this, and it's good that we can return our own creatures to our hand, start playing them again, getting the energy. So Engulf the Shore is awesome for all the practical reasons, and there's the stupid combo with Electrostatic Pummeler, so let's play all 4 of those. And then Glimmer of Genius overperforms, so it gets a whole 4F copy, or a playset. Not only because we're playing Dynavolt Tower, but just because it's a solid card. You know, we get to look at the top 2. Do we like those or not? Let's draw 2. You know, we can look it up to 4 cards basically. End up getting card advantage off of it and energy. So just everything about Glimmer is freaking incredible. There's 25 lands in the deck, and yeah, it's just a 1-color deck, but I still want to play the Aether Hubs. It's a free energy, basically. You can't beat that. 1 free energy? Why would we not do that? Here's a reason. Because the Aether Hubs effectively double the budget. The deck is about $20 on TCG Player right now, but if you add if you drop the Aether Hubs, that takes off like $9. You can build this deck for $11. Not bad. The Aether Hubs have really experienced a price hike. They were like $1, and now they're $2.25 all of a sudden. The card is really, really important already after the first week in the standard meta. The card is that good. And again, you know, you don't have to play it if you want. If you want, you could always save yourself the $9, put in more islands. That'll be more synergistic with Engulf the Shore, so you got that going for you. But I just love having a card that gives us a free energy for nothing. Here's our sideboard, and you can actually do a lot with your sideboard in mono blue, but I've gone pretty basic here, to be honest with you. And everything is good though. You know, Ceremonious Rejection counters artifacts, counters vehicles, counters Eldrazi. All of those things have some amount of presence in the format, at least in the first couple of weeks here. Negate counters planeswalkers, which is very important. We don't have much help against them. It can also protect our guys, which is important, especially if we're trying to kill shot with Electrostatic Pummeler. You know, if you've got 6 mana, then you can play your Engulf the Shore and then back up your Electrostatic Pummeler with a Negate. That can sometimes be really important after game 1. Aether Meltdown is just more defense against, aggro decks, which we do fairly poorly against, especially if we can't find an Engulf the Shore early. So even though it'll fall off after we bounce everything, Aether Meltdown is still 2 energy and a way to stop a creature for a few turns in the early game. So not bad, and could be in the main, but is relegated to the board because I just think we use our slots better with what we're doing in the main here. Dynavolt Tower, we're going to fill out the playset there. We got 1 copy of Perpetual Timepiece. I told you earlier that some games against grindier decks can get really, really long, and you don't want a deck, so Perpetual Timepiece can be important for drawing a bunch of cards in this deck. A lot of our stuff will help draw cards for us. So this will keep us from decking, and note that it gets specific cards back. You can put whatever cards you want, shuffle them back into your deck. And sometimes in the very late game, if we get there, that can be really, really important. Shuffle exactly what you need back into your libraries. Perpetual Timepiece is actually somewhat impressive in some games. And then Summary Dismissal obviously counters anything, but specifically counters cast triggers from big Eldrazi and stuff, which is important, especially against Emrakul. Not only do we counter the Emrakul, but we counter their ability to take over our next turn, which is good, because they could just like indiscriminately spend our energy and kill it, hit us with Dynavolt Tower or kill one of our creatures, who knows. So we could get really screwed if they take over our turn. So Summary Dismissal is very important out of the board. Like I've been doing lately, let's run over some cuts before I go to the power rankings, but there's really not too much to report. There's some basic stuff. I was playing Disappearing Act at first as a 2-of, because I thought maybe it'd be cool to return stuff to our hand and then play it for more energy later, and just, counter stuff. It just didn't, it was kind of awkward, didn't feel right. Confiscation Coup, I also trifled with, but wasn't very good because, again, when we bounce everything, they get a creature back. That's not great. Although I really do like Coup just as a card. I think it's awesome. Crush of Tentacles, I think we could try. I tried a 1-of and just wasn't super impressed. I feel like we already have Ancient. We already have Engulf the Shore, but Crush of Tentacles could be a way to return our artifacts to our hand, but other than Puzzleknot, we really don't want to do that necessarily, so just didn't really find a slot for it, although it could definitely, obviously go in. Crush looks good, especially with all of our 1-mana creatures, that possibly. And then Decoction Module, I haven't tried, but I've got it written down here because you could try it. It's an artifact for Era of Innovation. It provides energy too whenever creatures come into play. We're bouncing a lot of creatures. So, maybe. I just didn't find the slots for it, and I haven't tried it yet. And here are your power rankings right here. Final score of 56, which is really actually not that bad for a $20 deck, And again, if you take out the Aether Hubs, you lose some free energy production, but you really don't lose that much in the way of the overall power score. So for just 10 or 11 bucks, something in the mid-50s is really not bad, especially considering all of the synergy that this deck has. Nearly every card plays into each other, and again, over half the deck produces energy. So like a 15 energy for Electrostatic Pummeler and Engulf the Shore to win the game sounds like a lot. Really not, especially after we get the energy production going in the late game with Ancient and some small creatures, and we can start netting energy every turn. And we just win the game if we're patient enough. I'd really like you guys to try this one out. If nothing else, you see that the Game 1 and Game 2, the board scores, aren't incredible scores. You gotta be realistic. There's a lot of stuff with ETB triggers in the format right now, and returning that stuff to their hand is sometimes not advantageous, but at the same time, the deck is really, really fun to play, and if we can just start generating a bunch of energy, it won't necessarily matter that we return stuff to their hand that they want to play again, because sometimes they won't get the chance to play it again, especially considering Aethersquall Ancient, return everything to their hand, they'll get the ETB triggers again next turn, that's fine, whatever, but time being, we have a 6/6 flyer on a naked board that can swing in. So, even if they do have cards with good ETB triggers, sometimes it won't matter. Well, that's all for this deck. Let me know how you feel about this one in the comments section. What's weak about it? What's strong about it? What would you change? All of that usual stuff. I'm always interested in what you have to say. But what are we doing next time? I've got 2 decks that I'm going to spring on you, actually. I haven't talked that much about. Next time, I'm definitely going to do a deck that I am completely obsessed with at the time present, and that is green-black artifacts, and that's sort of a mid-budget deck. It's not incredibly expensive, but it's not 20 or 30 bucks. That deck will cost you about $100 on TCG Player, but I have really, really enjoyed playing it. It's like playing Aristocrats in Standard without Nantuko Husk by Igby. So I really want to give you that deck. And after that, coming soon, will be a blue-white blink deck that I'm going to do a double deck tech out of. The first deck is going to be so budget that it's actually peasant. It uses only commons and uncommons, and will only cost you about 10 bucks, and is a solid build. And in that same video, I'm going to give you a competitive blue-white Eldrazi Displacer deck too. So look out for those deck techs in the future. Subscribe so you can get all that content, and then like this If you liked this, which I hope you did, I've really had a lot of fun playing and making this deck. It's one of my favorite budget decks in a really long time, and I hope you like it. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.